Welcome back to the Naturally Balanced Show. I am your host, Marissa Fay, a functional nutritional therapy practitioner who specializes in women's hormone health and gut health. I am so glad you are here. On today's episode, I want to talk about some common misconceptions that are going around on social media right now, and in particular, that I've been hearing in a lot of podcasts spoken by some people who have big reputations in the health space. And I want to give you a really realistic take from somebody who has spent many, many years in this industry, who has had my business for 8 years, who has been working with women all over the world. I'm probably over 1,000 at this point. I've lost track, to be quite honest, because I'm noticing that a couple of things. One, social media is a blessing and a curse. Like, you have probably found me through social media, and I'm so glad you are here. And you are about to get information that is going to support you. Whether or not I'm the practitioner who's going to help you and be your guide and whatever, you're going to learn some things from me. If you follow me, if you watch my videos, if you decide to work with me or download any of my freebies, you're going to learn some good shit. Okay. But that can't be said for everyone or everything. An appearance by my cat Tigra. We'll see if she graces us with her full presence across the screen. But that cannot be said for everything that you see or hear. And it can be really damaging, actually, to receive information from social media or podcasts or online from people who have really large followings, who have made a lot of money with what they do, who seem to be an authority, but actually don't have clinical experience. Because having the experience of learning how to look at lab work, learning how to connect the lab work to the symptoms you're experiencing, learning how to give personalized recommendations or teach you how to take personalized recommendations with my course, the Balanced Hormone Blueprint does. It teaches you how to interpret and understand what your body is saying, and then how to shift recommendations based on that. But there has to be this level of personalization or customization, because if the same health advice worked for everyone, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't. You would have tried the first thing you saw on social media, like intermittent fasting as a woman, and you would have done that for years and years, and you would be feeling amazing and you'd be cured. But you're not. So, this is why we have to understand the nuance to health, the fact that we are all different bodies. Some things are going to work for you, some things are not, but also a lot of information out there that you're consuming for free is bad advice. And unless you have experience and expertise and education and training and things like that, it's going to be hard to decipher. So, this is the episode for you to help debunk at least some of the common things that are out there right now. So, first, actually, let's start out with intermittent fasting. So, Dr. Mindy Peltz, right? You have probably come across her content. And in fact, the fact that I just named her means now your phone is listening and you will see her. She talks about fasting like a girl, right? What I think is damaging about her messaging is, number one, if you really get in the weeds on her definition of fasting, it's not really fasting, y'all. It's having dinner at 6 p.m., it's going to sleep, it is waking up, and it is having breakfast at 7 a.m. That is a 13-hour fast, by the way. I do not consider that intermittent fasting. I consider that a healthy time without food, and what I strive to have most of my clients be able to tolerate really, really well. Now, signs you aren't tolerating that are things like sometimes sleep disturbances, sometimes blood sugar dropping too low overnight, especially, sometimes being moodier, sometimes having a lot of fatigue during the day. So there can be a lot of reasons why that may not work for you for a time, and we may do something different. Like, I have plenty of clients who are in the stage of life where they are either trying to conceive or they have a young one and they're waking up a lot. And for those people, we actually do like a bedtime snack that's high fat, high protein, low carb, for example. And that works really well for them, right? So going a 13 hours without food isn't good for them. But here's the reason that intermittent fasting in a lot of bodies, especially women's bodies, does not work very well. And it has to do with how susceptible we are to the experience of cortisol, or a stress hormone. Cortisol is a major stress hormone. There are other hormones I would say fall into the category of being stress related, but cortisol is going to be the big one. Okay. As females, we are very, very sensitive to cortisol. And that is because our bodies are wired to only be fertile, right? To only have our hormones related to cycling regulated really, really well if we're safe. Now, if you think about this from a survival perspective, right? Evolutionarily, if there was famine, so if we were not having easy access to food or enough access to enough food, right, those things are going to get out of whack. Hello, modern life and chronic dieting, right? If we are not somewhere safe enough to have a great night of sleep, again, that is going to cause a release of stress hormones. That's going to dysregulate stress hormones. So, yet another reason why, if you are not sleeping well, we can almost guarantee stress hormones are off, cortisol is off, and that is going to influence cycling hormones as well. Which a lot of times when we talk about cycling hormones, we think about estrogen and progesterone, but there are actually others as well, such as FSH and LH. But that's a story for another time. Let me know in the comments if you want me to do a deep dive on cycling specific hormones. But those can get dysregulated. If you are in a situation many of your days where you experience extreme distress, I've had this with very stressful jobs, even, but a stressful relationship. I grew up in a home with abuse. Okay. That's going to dysregulate hormones, right? That is going to impact your body's survival instincts. So, all of these things, right, are going to require that your body say, not safe to procreate here, not safe, right? And when that happens, we see a lot of things occur. But what I see in a lot of my clients that is alarming to them is we see major impacts to brain fog, to energy, to mood, and to weight. Okay. So it is one of the top reasons that I rarely use what I would consider is true intermittent fasting, which again, I don't consider what Dr. Mindy Peltz pushes most of the time as intermittent fasting. I consider that just a healthy amount of time to not be eating, right? So why are we calling that intermittent fasting? It's not the same thing. So that's a gimmick in my opinion. And I want you to be aware of that. Now, intermittent fasting, I would consider something over 14 hours where you are not eating and where you are actively choosing to avoid food. And in most women's bodies, if you are dealing with even an average amount of stress, just a normal amount of stress, traffic, right? And you feel stressed about that. A disagreement with someone and you feel stressed about that. You're under eating a little bit and your body is feeling stressed about that. Your body isn't getting all the nutrients it needs and it's feeling stressed about that. You are vulnerable. And so it's not a great time to do something like that intermittent fasting, again, that I would consider 14 plus hours of actively and purposely avoiding food on a regular basis. Now, that said, I have days in my life where technically I am intermittent fasting, but I'm not actively doing it, right? It's like just something happens in life. Occasionally I eat dinner at 5 p.m., right? And then I don't eat after that. And I wake up at 6 or 7 and I eat around 8, right? Did I purposely or intentionally do that? No. Does it happen sometimes? And I'm metabolically flexible enough, I'm hormonally healthy enough that it doesn't disrupt my body. It even might feel good every once in a while. Yes, that's the goal, right? We want to increase your resilience. Okay. So that's a key piece here. So that's intermittent fasting. And by the way, if you want a deeper dive on any of this, let me know in the comments because I'd love to hear your suggestions. So that's one I want to debunk. Next one I want to debunk. Okay, dear Dave Asprey. So first of all, there's gratitude. Dave Asprey is the father of biohacking, like coined the term in his book and in his blog years ago. I believe it was like in the early to mid-ish 2000, so somewhere between 2000 and 2010. And biohacking is the idea of hacking, right, your biology so that you can live longer and have increased longevity. But we're really talking especially about health span, not lifespan. So health span, which is a term I really, really like, is the idea of increasing the number of years that you live with good health. Lifespan, right, is just how long you live. You could live a really long time and you could be miserable the last 20 or 30 years because of a chronic disease you have. No one wants that, right? For me personally, I want to live relatively healthfully, to be mobile, to be experiencing and enjoying life as long as possible. And then when that's no longer possible, I don't want to linger for decades. That does not sound good to me. Okay. So I'm interested in health span, right? And I would say so are the people like Dave Asprey. So, I love that he made a lot of that information accessible. However, in the process, he also has kind of come across as like a pseudoscientist, a pseudo doctor. He's not a doctor, he's not a scientist, he's just somebody deeply interested, right? And he has peddled various misinformation of half truths. So I was listening to a podcast recently, and he said something like where he was promoting his coffee line that he says is tested for mold, which is great. Coffee that is both organic and tested for mold is the best kind of coffee to be drinking if you are a coffee drinker. So I love that he's saying it's important that we test coffee for mold. It's one of the highest moldy foods because it sits in the processing experience. So I love that he's educating people about that and sharing about that and bringing a product to market that prioritizes that. So thumbs up. However, where he gets this wrong is then he goes on to say that people can drink his particular brand of coffee who typically have said, oh, I can't touch caffeine. I get so jittery. I get so anxious. It's such a problem for me, but I can drink your coffee. Why? And he tries to say that the reason is because it is mold free. My friends, that is bullshit. And I will tell you, as somebody who has worked with clients who have mold exposure that is really bogging their body down, that has really disrupted how they feel, how they live their life. Mold exposure, if you are somebody who can easily become sick from it, is traumatic. It truly is. It completely dysregulates sleep. It often forces your body to put on a lot of protective weight. It can impact your cycle, your moods, your skin, your breathing. It is really, really a lot for the system in bodies where you really can't tolerate even a small amount. So it is no joke. Now, that said, anything more than small amounts of mold in healthy bodies that don't have an issue with this, it still can be problematic if you're living in a very moldy environment, right? So that's just something to know. And most people who remediate it or try to clean it up create more problems. Bleach does not kill mold, it can make it worse. That's something to know if you ever find mold in your home. And I really like to have clients clean with a product called EC3, like even for shower mildew, even if you are somebody who is not mold sensitive. Okay. So mold can really be a problem. However, the reason people are likely experiencing more of what they think is not jitteriness with his coffee, I don't think has as much for all of them to do with the mold. Maybe some of them, right? Some of them perhaps are mold sensitive, live in a moldy environment, and it does make a difference, right? But the reason you're going to experience issues with caffeine, such as jitteriness or feeling overly amped or things like that, are often going to have to do with two things. Number one, your genetics. And I run genetic testing. I personally am actually somebody who metabolizes caffeine very slowly, which means it sticks around in my system longer than we really want it to. And it can have a great impact later in the day on what's going on with my hormones, my energy, my mood, and how easily I sleep or not. So number one, genetics are a big factor with how you're going to handle caffeine. And that's something where you need to know genetics overall do not determine your fate. A lot of us want to believe it does. It really doesn't in most cases. And there's somebody who I've done some mentoring with who's a really skilled doctor. And he talks about how if genetics were the thing that were going to get you on something, you wouldn't have made it into adulthood. Like if genetics were really going to be the determining factor on most things, not everything, but on most things, and it was that detrimental to your survivor, it would be unlikely to make it into adulthood. And I think that really is resonant. And what I mean by this is not that genetics can't contribute to issues, right? I get asked all the time about like MTHFR, right? Issues. And it's like, yeah, I can see how that can contribute to things for sure. I look at blood work and I can see issues with that without even seeing the genes of it, right? I can see issues when it comes to vitamin B12, right? And not even testing pure B12, by the way. By the way, the marker I really like to look at is homocysteine. It's a really fantastic marker, by the way. And we're looking for optimal anytime I look at blood work, not diagnostic. It's a much tighter range, by the way, than what doctors are looking for to signal that like we need to implement a treatment, for example. But we can see that without looking at somebody's genetics, and we can work on it without looking at somebody's genetics. So there are some times where genetic information can really change the course of how I might support someone on the functional medicine side of what I do. And there's sometimes where it really doesn't. And I would say that's an example where it doesn't always, right? But going back to this conversation around caffeine, so we have this factor that genetics play a role. Now, I didn't need to do genetic testing to know that I was sensitive to caffeine. It's an experience that I have every time I drink too much caffeine, okay? Or every time I drink too much coffee. Now, the next thing is if your cortisol is dysregulated, so again, a stress hormone, if it is dysregulated, or if you are a woman who is experiencing a lot of chronic stress or a lot of chronic hormone dysregulation, which, you know, in the work that I do, people who work in marketing will always say, get really specific, name exact symptoms so that you, my viewer, can understand what those symptoms are. And the more I do this work, the more I've come to see that women who suspect they have a hormonal issue will say just that. I'm hormonal. I'm hormonal. I don't feel balanced. I don't feel good. I'm hormonal, right? So if you're feeling that way, caffeine is probably something you need to be leery of and be really strategic about how you use it or drink it. Okay. And first of all, no energy drinks, no caffeine powders, no none of that. We're talking like coffee, green tea, matcha, black tea. We're talking about the real shit, okay? From real foods, right? That's what we're looking at here when I'm talking to you about caffeine. There's no world in which I'm recommending anybody use caffeine from another source, frankly, for what I do at least. So it may be that caffeine is not great for your body right now. And if you are somebody who drinks it on an empty stomach, a simple fix you can do is have your cup of coffee after breakfast. Easy. So, so easy, and see how you do. If that still makes you a little wired, a little jittery, a little too energized, sweaty palms, then you are probably caffeine sensitive. And I am one of those people. And I don't need Dave Asprey special coffee to know that. And I have tried various coffees that are like, mold certified and organic and all this. And I still have a cup of coffee here and there, by the way, and I can tolerate it here and there. But if I go back to an everyday habit, hell no, I just can't. Okay. So that's the next thing. Now, the third topic I want to touch on, also, I can't help but notice how frizzy my hair is right now. I live in Colorado, which is a dry climate, by the way. Fun fact, high desert. And it has been raining a lot. And so it's more humid here. And so my hair is just poofy. So let's enjoy that. But anyways, the third one I want to talk about is actually Lauren Bostic, who is the host of the Skinny Confidential. And also that's a product line. And I admire a lot of what she does. So I want to say that. And I have a controversial take on something she shared recently. And especially as someone who has supported clients on their fertility journey and through their pregnancies, prenatal, postnatal, all of that. So she is pregnant right now at the time of me recording this, and she has posted a couple episodes about, I'm just checking the time, y'all, because I have a meeting here soon, but I want to get this to you. Okay. She has posted about how she feels like her pregnancies have been really easy, that she's gotten pregnant really super easily. And she feels like everything out there that you hear is people who have trouble getting pregnant. And so she wanted to put out there a message that like some people actually get pregnant easily. Um, and I'm going to tell you something. I support her putting that message out there. I do. And not because it invalidates the pain and the suffering that so many people go through, because I want to acknowledge that. And I've helped women in that situation. And it is very difficult, right? And I have tons of empathy for that. But because I think her story is just as valid and valuable as other stories. And what I think we need to take away from her story is looking at the way she lives her life. Now, many of us can't live our lives exactly how she does. She has a lot of funds that she dedicates, right, to a lot of wellness hacks, to a lot of expensive products, to trial and error of a lot of things. And I love that for her. But she lives a lower toxin life. She is mindful of her toxin exposure. She is mindful of eating a diet that includes a lot of well sourced animal protein. She is mindful of her light exposure, so her exposure to daylight, right? She is mindful, right, of how she speaks about her health and her well-being. And she's mindful of the supplements she uses. And while on her podcast it sounds like she takes generic information, I get the feeling that she works really closely with a functional medicine provider and only takes things that they give like a thumbs up on. And so these are all things that I do recommend if you are struggling with preconception and fertility, or you want to prepare your body for that. I recommend going through those things. Literally, my course, The Balanced Hormone Blueprint, will walk you through that. You can DIY it. You can also work with me one-on-one. It's one of my specialty areas, and we can get your body prepped and ready. But I think her story is just as valid and important is because those things can improve fertility for some women. Now, what percentage? We don't know, right? We don't know. But still, it's important that that story be out there, that that message be out there, and that we understand that issues with fertility, the fix is not always going to have to be IVF, right? Or you may not always be in a situation where it's impossible to get pregnant. Now, it may be, right? There are stories, there are situations where it is just very challenging and difficult. And I'm so sorry if you are one of those people. And I also think every fertility clinic out there, any IVF doctor should first go through all of those steps with you. Let's audit your toxin exposure. Let's get your detoxification working better. Let's test your body. Let's do a total tox panel. Let's look at an HTMA test and look at your minerals and your heavy metal exposure. Let's improve your diet. Let's look at supplements and customize those to what your body needs. Let's not just look at your body. Let's also do all of that for your partner, the other person. Really damn important because male infertility is on the rise. And I have no doubt about that having to do with chemical exposure, by the way. No doubt about it. And I'm not talking like, oh, you live near a plant and they put something in the water. No, I'm talking about what's in your tap water, which if you don't believe me that there's harmful stuff, go to ewg.org/tapwater. Look up where you live if you're in the United States. If you're out of the United States, I guarantee you have a water sanitation authority. You can reach out to them and ask. They probably have to do regular testing for what's in the water. Ask them for the report, okay? But I guarantee it's everyday exposures like that. It's plastics, right? Tupperware that you're storing your food in. It's nonstick pans you're cooking your food with. It's your personal care products, your cleaning products. It's all the fragrances, the candles, the air fresheners, okay? All of that is disrupting hormones for everyone. And that's a problem not just for your fertility, by the way. That's a problem for your health span. Okay. It's a problem for your longevity. It's a problem for your long term health. And you need to be concerned about that. Okay. So with that, I'm going to wrap up this episode. Thank you so much for joining me here on the Naturally Balanced Hormones podcast and show. I am Marissa Fay again. I'm going to drop the link below. If you want to set up a discovery call, I'd love to connect with you. You can book that at bit.ly. So bit.ly/ready, the number 4 health. And you can find me at Marissa Fay Wellness on Instagram. And I'll see you soon.